Intro. So, yikes. Mitered siding. Popular in like the 30s. 1910s maybe. Camp vibe. My house got it, but they have the little metal attachments. You know, it's like everybody says they're always going to open up. They just happen to do a terrible job on my house. We'll fix that later. Introduction. I'm going to show you guys how I cut miters. I'm going to install some of them, show you my kit that I use, how I glue them, how I fasten them, my apprehensions, my fears, my interests. You know, I'm going to do the best I can. I'll show you everything I've ever learned. Making sure that my siding's overhanging long enough on both sides, since I don't have anything to butt against. I'm just checking to make sure that my miters will actually close. Here I'm just going to install a little plumb strip, so then I have something to return my miters against. Normally you're going to want to put your windows in before your siding. I don't have that luxury because I'm making all my own windows. I'm going to have a video series on that. Here I'm just doing some quick test fits, so I cut one that I thought was right. And I'm just going to go up the line pretty quickly here and just make sure that there's nothing that I'm missing, nothing I'm screwing up. And then I'll take this tester as my template. Making sure it's not too long. Double checking again that my miters are going to close. That's going to be the biggest issue, is if your miters don't close. Doesn't matter how much glue you dump in there, how many fasteners. If they start open, they're only going to get more open. So it's just about double checking. Can't rush through any of it. So right here what I'm doing is I'm making a compound angle. So I have it kicked out the thickness of the material, and then I have the saw set at 45. I batch all this stuff, so I'm going to just cut a bunch of these compound angles. And then you'll see I'll take my tester piece and use that to set up a stop block. And then I can cut everything to width. Now, all those pieces that I pre-cut, I just throw them up against the stop block and chop them. A lot of little pieces. Most people use corner boards, board and batten. That's kind of it. I mean, it is a barn. Clapboards. Mitered clapboard. Not beveled siding, no tongue and groove. I really wanted to do shakes. Thought that would have been pretty, the whole thing. This is setting the angle for the first course. So I've made 2 of these, a right and a left. And then this establishes my 2 angles that I have to cut the pieces at. And all I'm doing here is just back beveling. So the only thing that'll be touching the sill is the leading edge. And I obviously didn't change my blade in a while. Win some, you lose some. But essentially you're just cutting right along the line and then you're going to dress it in. So this pairing doesn't have to be perfect. Again, you're just kind of working to that line. So I'm just going to check my fit. Roughly the parts are the same. I'll just clean up some of this fuzz and then go do a dry fit. It's a lot of dry fitting. This first course always takes a little bit longer. So you see it's sitting a little high up top, but once I tap it in place, it's going to set down and be right against the sill. And then I make sure that it's back there touching my plumb line. Now we just got to start gluing and nailing. Oh, I'll caulk where the sill, so there's a gap between the sill and the window buck, and then I'll caulk that. So even though there's a membrane underneath it, any water that can get back behind there, it's going to hit that caulking line, and it's going to run down the sill. Here I'm using my glue, which I'll talk about in a minute. That is way too much. I was having a hard time getting it to run. I think it was maybe 5 degrees when I was doing this. I'll talk about it, but that's why I use this hot melt polyurethane. But essentially you have to get squeeze out in the front just to know that everything's closed up. And so I just hand hold it till it tacks, and you'll see a bunch more of that. And then I throw brad nails. Here I can only get 2. Generally I shoot for 4. So I wanted to show you my kit for making my miters. We'll start with the glue, then we'll talk about there's that thing, look at that thing. So this is hot melt polyurethane. Stronger than construction adhesive. It will set in any temperature. It is completely waterproof, weather resistant. I think it has some good UV properties. I don't really remember. But essentially, we're gonna glue a bunch of end grain together that's gonna be seeing a whole bunch of weather. So I took a long time to figure out my glue. I knew I was gonna be doing this throughout the winter, so I had to make sure I had a glue that would set in any temperature. And this is it. This one is their general, all-purpose. They make one that's designed for wood to wood, which is even stronger. I think, here, I wrote it down. Construction adhesive. The liquid nails, extreme heavy duty, has a PSI shear strength of 500. So 500 PSI for shear strength. This stuff, which is not as good as the wood to wood, is, I believe it's 900. So wood to wood has 1400 PSI. And this stuff, the MP75, they're multi-purpose, has a holding strength of 900 PSI, and it'll set in any temperature. I also needed to think about how quickly it would tack. So this has to be plugged in. It takes a little while to heat up. There's two settings on the gun, 248 degrees Fahrenheit and 356. It is a little finicky to use. There's a couple tricks. There's a great video of a guy that talked about how he does it for his interior millwork. So rather than explaining it, I'll just link that in the description. It will tack in 75 seconds. So that's why I have my ledger board on either side, and I can take it and slide those together, just finger pressure, let it hold, it'll tack. And then I shoot some brads in there. So these are 18 gauge stainless steel brads. I try to throw 4 in there. My wood is 3/4 thick, so I throw 2 crossways above the exposure, so those are completely hidden, and then I can actually, because it's so thick, I can actually cross them underneath, so there's no visible fasteners whatsoever. So yeah, so I glue and nail every single miter, and then we can talk about the wood. It's worth talking to whoever you're getting your material from and try to get as much vertical grain as you can, also known as rift sawn. I don't know what else it would be called. So that's where they rotate the board, and as much of the grain is straight. If it's plain sawn, right, where, because like that, as it dries, like that, as it dries, it always wants to straighten out. So this is gonna get flatter and flatter and pull apart whatever is glued to it. So yeah, so like 90% of what I have is rift. Some of it gets a little bit questionable, but that's still better than all flat sawn. Plain sawn. I don't know, I call it both. I don't know what the right thing to call it is. Nobody ever's corrected me. No one's ever corrected me. Flat sawn. Yeah, flat sawn. So that's it, other than, I think the rain's coming. It's gonna be icy tomorrow. I should go get those ladders inside. Okay. You can probably still hear the rain. I'm doing this thing now, and then I was gonna do the work tomorrow. So it might be an ice rink. But, rift sawn, vertical grain. That's the hopes that once I glue these things together, when I glue those things together, as the wood expands and contracts, the grain's not gonna wanna flatten out. It's gonna expand and contract that way, rather than trying to cup. So yeah, glue that sets really fast, stronger than construction adhesive, set in any temperature, kind of miserable to use. Trying to get your best choice of lumber. Try not to use a bunch of plain sawn, flat sawn, plat sawn, as we decided. And something's definitely gonna fail. So, the way that I did the barn is I made the frame, then I covered the entire frame from a roof membrane down below the sills, completely in plastic, all shingle wrap. Then I hung 6 inches of rigid foam insulation on the outside of that. Then I put strapping to nail the siding to. So I shouldn't need a diaphragm because it's a timber frame. I will have a diaphragm. Is it a diaphragm? Yeah. When I build out the shop, I'm gonna hang, rather than sheetrock or just plaster, plywood on the inside of the building so that I have good mounting surface, and then that's gonna give me my diaphragm, but none of that has anything to do with miters. So at the corners, I have plywood gussets at the corners of the building, or where I'm returning into a window, all the window bucks are completely wrapped in plastic and flashed. And I use this straight flashing. I think this is zip, but is any butyl zip butyl based product, I suppose. Kind of wanted to try that paintable butyl, but I didn't do that. I don't know if that would work. But so if and when a miter fails, it's got to travel 6 3/4. My studs are out past the barn, at least 7.5 inches before it can even get to the plastic that's protecting the frame. So now it's just a question of aesthetics, because it's going to be really tough for water to rot the frame. And then the best thing about aesthetics is, you know, wabi-sabi, and or who the hell cares? But I think after this, I'll do a once a year checkup to see how the miters are holding up, and I'll share it with you guys. I'm pretty interested to see. So that's the kit. So I'm just going to show you some installation here. It's the same process over and over. It's just all about consistency and thoroughness. You can see a bit of my membrane, so just in case any of them do fail, everything's wrapped in plastic, flashed back. I always have a nail with me, and this does two things. One, it's a real quick way to help get some of that uncured glue off, and two, it makes sure that the tip, the leading edge of that miter is all closed. So I'm actually just burnishing it down. You shouldn't have to burnish it a lot, but you will get a little additional squeeze out, and that just makes sure that that front edge is closed. You have to work really fast with that glue though. Here we get to see I just crossed my brads. 2 in the top cross, 2 in the bottom. I set my gun to the highest temperature, especially because I'm working outside. It makes it a little more viscous, so it does run down the miters. But I've had stuff cool a little too quick, or not want to come out of the gun fast enough when I'm outside in the winter. Just gotta get that little bit of squeeze out on the front edge, then you'll see me, I'll burnish it over, get some of that uncured glue. I'm not really rolling the edge as much as pushing each side into itself. And then what I do after I do a whole run of siding is I go back and I'll nail set anything that's sticking out on those lower brads. This guy up top was fighting me a little bit, so I focused on getting the exposure, everything that was in the exposed miter closed, and then I was able to tap the top in just that little bit. Now I'm just keeping some pressure till that glue starts to turn a pale white, and then I can start to get it off before it really sets. See that extra little bit of squeeze out. It's not for the faint of heart, that's for sure. Glue, glue, mechanical fasteners, wood selection, wall system. Do I look like I'm hunching a lot? I feel like I'm hunching. Check it out. I'll show you how to do it. Is this helpful? So I met a guy who teaches people how to do dry stack stone walls. I want to make a faux foundation around the thing and the barn. Right now it's on concrete piers, and he said something that's really smart. He said a couple things that are really smart. But one, people come up to him all the time and they go, "Hey, Steve." We'll go Steve. "Hey Steve, I got this really big old pile of rocks out in the back 40. What do you think they're out there for? Is the farmer using it? I heard maybe to catch water." Or Steve goes, "Well, you got to remember, they're farmers. They probably plowed them up, put them in a pile so they weren't in the way, and got on with their lives." That's how I feel about, timber frame fetish. Farmers been making barns with whatever wood they got. So we'll see. I really think this pine's gonna hold up all right. What's all right? I mean, it's not hardy board. Everything needs maintenance, repairs. I mean, I'm pushing it with these miters, but I don't know. Don't get me wrong, I love to fetishize things. Subscribe. Yeah, that's a good sale. Don't sell a sale. Heard that on TV.